Hey, everybody, we're back with another episode of Life in Law. Today we have a special guest with us, Al. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Good to be here. Thank you.
And do you want to just tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself, just to start off?
Uh, well, I'm 52 years old, and for the purposes of the show, I was in a divorce um, 10 years ago, 2015, and went through the, if you want to call it, divorce court process with the New Haven Family Court, which is what we're here to talk about. Uh, my background, I used to be a teacher. I have an engineering degree. I live in New Haven, Connecticut, and that's pretty much it. Everything else, if anybody was interested, you can find on my profile on FB.
Okay. And so you said that you started getting involved in the New Haven Superior Court back in 2015.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I got involved. I'd say I got thrown into it. I hate to sound like it's a joke, but
You
it
had
was a roller coaster ride.
the misfortune of having to go to that place that we all hate.
Yeah, well, when you've never been through something and you have different ideas about the way that something's supposed to be, especially court processes, and you find out it's not exactly like you see on them television shows. Uh yeah, you're going through it pretty blind, and it's an experience. Let's put it that way.
So when you were in the New Haven Superior Court, when you dealt with your divorce, you said that you had a lawyer at first.
Yeah, I mean, I would to give a little bit of some of the details. I had a sheriff showed up one morning at the house with a restraining order and a divorce summons. And within, I would say, the next couple of days after the shock of it all, I finally came to. That was the first thing. You figure that's what you normally do. If you're getting divorced, you figure I got to get a lawyer. And I got a lawyer. I actually had one recommended to me. Now, for some of the people who don't know New Haven, Connecticut alone has about 10,000 lawyers. I got a lawyer recommended that was in actually the same building as my ex's lawyer, one floor below. If you
Red
want to
flag.
talk about coincidence, if you want to talk about a coincidence,
That should have been a red flag.
that was the first of very many red flags I can't even begin to tell you.
So, okay, so you ended up getting this lawyer, and did you guys end up having a trial with your divorce, or did you come to an agreement?
You know, that's not exactly, if you want to talk about right at the beginning. No, no, because right at the beginning, I had a lawyer for 3 months, and I was going to court hearings, and I guess you call them hearings or whatever. Um, I was being spoon fed information, very little. And my first lawyer, which I had for about 3 months, every time that I asked questions of anything, his basic response almost every time was, "We're not at that point yet. We're not at that point yet." And without trying to sound stupid here, I basically went through a whole year wondering what point were we at. And as far as, like you said, were we trying to reach agreements? No, if you want to know the truth from the very beginning, nobody told me what we were doing. I got to a point where I ended up having to look up laws, processes. Um, I actually ended up started reading what they call the Connecticut practice book to find out formalities and technicalities and everything else that's supposed to go along. And, little by little, I gained an understanding of all the basic filings and motions and due processes, even discovery exchange. And as I was going through it, I just started getting that feeling more and more like, no, we're not going by the book. Something's not adding up. And as I said, I don't want to sound like I'm looking for explanations here, but I got through the years after even, I've told people many times, as far as making agreements, yeah, I made many agreements that I didn't even know I was making or would have wanted to make if someone had asked me, do you agree to this? I felt like I was being told, this is what has to happen, this is what you have to do. And I was going along with a lot of it because I didn't know on many things, even supervision, agreeing to disbursements from joint assets. And I found there were many contradictions and, how should I say it, technicalities that popped up that, like I said, was contradicting and going exactly against all the doings and procedures that I had looked up. And through the years, yeah, I let's just say I had 8 lawyers. And every time that I questioned a law or told them I looked something up, a handful, would sit there and look at me and say, nah, don't bother to do that. Nah, don't waste your time. Don't waste my time looking up laws and procedures. So I got the impression that they were making it up as they went along. And then I found out down the road what was called ADR, alternative dispute resolution, mediation, coming to agreements, and all these things. I could say now, yeah, they were happening, and I wish somebody told me about it at the time. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues for many people today with their own lawyers. I've seen it. I've talked to many, not only in Connecticut, in different states. It's just the anxiety and disparity, depravedness, that's a good word, just being lost from not being properly informed. These lawyers are taking people's cases and literally doing nothing but making them more submissible, making them more lost and not empowering clients at all. And that's not what I believe lawyers are supposed to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, speaking as somebody who it's always been my dream to be a lawyer ever since I was a little girl, and who was in law school for 2 years before both of my children were illegally taken by judges in the New Haven Superior Court, or actually a judge, Jane Cupson Grossman, who's now in Waterbury doing civil and criminal cases. And, it's crazy because these lawyers are like sharks. Like they'll say anything just to get you to sign with them, just to get your retainer. And then once they get paid, they'll do anything to suck up that retainer as fast as they possibly can and bill you for any little thing. You call them to ask them a question, they're going to send you a bill for $400. you call them and you know, whatever it is, like they'll say anything to you just to get you to sign them. And one of the things that people don't realize is in Connecticut, like, yes, they do try to funnel you through the ADR, where how they first will say to you, like, okay, we'll see family relations. They'll try to see if there's any agreement on any of the issues whatsoever. If there is, that's good. Some people go to family relations, they come up with an agreement, they go in front of the judge stamps it, they're on with their day. Other times, like they'll go in family and they'll say, okay, we only agree on these financial issues, but the custody things, we don't agree. So if they can't agree, then they'll say, okay, we'll have a hearing with the judge, which is not a trial. It's just a hearing on the motion, whatever that specific motion is. If you're going to have a full trial, it's like when people say, okay, my divorce was finalized on such and such date. Your divorce would be finalized either through the finishing of your trial or through a final agreement by agreement and a final judgment. So in order to get that final judgment, it's either through agreement or through trial. And as we all know, usually in family court, the trials are not a jury trial. They're a bench trial with a judge, which means that the judge has the ethical responsibility to act as a neutral, like, you know, unbiased party to decide based only on the evidence that's presented to them in the court. And so, you know, basically it's like you can study the law left and right and understand it and memorize all the books, but that's not how these lawyers operate in Connecticut. And that's not how they teach law students either. They teach us one thing, which is networking. And everything is about who you know, who you're friends with. And so it's like these lawyers don't need, like we said, like you bring up the laws, you bring up the statutes, you say to them, why aren't you doing this the proper way, the procedure, whatever, and they say, don't even talk to me about that, because their way of working is going out for lunch with the judge and paying for the bill. That's their way, you know. And so they don't need to know the laws if they're just doing backroom deals and bribes and stuff like that, which is kind of what happens in New Haven all the time. And I know that we spoke you know, the other day, and you were saying to me that throughout the process that you had signed things that you didn't even realize you were signing agreements that later they said, oh, you signed this agreement on this date, and your lawyer never disclosed to you and made it so you fully understood what you were signing and that you were agreeing to something. And the court later said you consented, but you didn't know you were consenting to that because the lawyer didn't explain it. Is that true?
It's true. And for me to say that at the time that I was signing things that I didn't know what I was signing. Well, no, I knew what I was signing. The question was, why am I signing these things? I'll give you one specific example. I like to give examples sometimes to reinforce things that I'm explaining. And this is going to be very specific without the background story. We were in the family court and we had just come out of the family relations office down on the third floor. I was walking down the hallway with my lawyer. Now, I had a restraining order in place that had been extended for 6 months because my lawyer, my first one, said it would be better that if I don't fight it, but sign it, what they call nolo conteste or something like that, where I'm not going to fight it, but I'm not admitting that the allegations are true. And if I know now if I knew then what I know now, I would have wanted my hearing.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like they don't tell you that you have the right to take it to trial. They just make it seem like you have to agree or nothing. It's agree to this or nothing. They don't explain to you properly, like, no, it's your right to take it to trial. And in family court, and especially in New Haven, they will just bypass the trial and they'll say, yeah, you'll get a trial, and it never comes. I've never had a trial in my life, ever, not once.
And most people don't. And I know many that every time that they're set up for trial, the closer they get to it, it either gets continued or pushed off. The lawyers aren't preparing.
Yeah. And then next thing you know, the judge is issuing final orders when no trial took place, when really you have the right to bring witnesses. You have, in some trials in the case law in Connecticut, it'll say like, this person had a trial. It lasted 52 days. Like the trial's over when you say it's over. In my case, not only did we not get a trial, but the judge gave us a 2-hour hearing and then said, I'm making a decision at 5:00, whether you're done or not. It's highly illegal and violates my right to due process to say that you have 2 hours and I don't care if you're done. It's 2 hours and that's it.
Yes, and that doesn't surprise me what you're saying. I've found that to be true with many others. And being very serious, if people do not know what trial looks like, well, you better go watch them Law and Order series. You better watch them court drama TVs, because that's what trial's all about. Depositions, witnesses, evidences, both sides. That although as dramatized as those shows are, the fact is those are all the components. It's about one side has to be able to prove their case, and the other side gets to defend against it. And if the other side decides that they want to bring their own case, filing a cross complaint, then it's like it's two trials in one in back of the other, really, if you think about it. A lot of people don't get a chance to file that cross complaint. Like I said, there's a lot of things that I found that they just conveniently circumvent. But I want to go back to just the example that I was given. So I was walking through the hallway with my lawyer with an extended restraining order. And the lawyer turned to me and said, and we had just got out of the courtroom upstairs where we made an agreement for taking allotments out of our joint checking, which joint checking and all assets are supposed to be frozen. But I was starting to realize more and more that certain things could be agreed upon. Anyways, my lawyer turned to me and says, I need you to initial this. And at the top of this agreement that we had, it says the defendant agrees that the plaintiff has sole custody, something like that. I looked at her and I says, what's this? She says, well, somebody's got to make the decisions for your son, and you have no contact and a restraining order. This is my second lawyer, actually. I had already fired the first one. So I looked at her and I said, permanently? Oh, no. She said, just while you have a restraining order. I said, and I initialed it. If I could go back to that time travel back, I would have punched myself right in the face to buy that kind of BS.
But see how that was like, it was coercion. Like she lied to you to get you to sign.
She twisted the truth.
If she said to you, no, it'll be permanent, would you have signed? If she asked, exactly.
But the reality was that we were in what they call until the divorce is finalized or even custody proceedings, is called pedente lit, however you pronounce it, which means during litigation. And nothing's finalized till, like you said, final orders. And I remember when my restraining order ended 6 months later, and the first thing I asked my lawyer, I said, gee, what about that sole custody? Oh, we'd have to have a hearing for that. Oh, wait a minute. I was told that it was just while there was a restraining order and then it would magically go away. Now we have to have a hearing. Never got that hearing. Never got that we were preparing. Well, I was going to get my day in court, and you're going to be able to have witnesses and evidences, and then you'll go right off on the unicorn we have waiting for you outside. sorry to be a little facetious and cynical about it, but that was, you know, when I heard after that restraining order that I just signed something that was clearly not explained. And why would anybody write something in after we just got out of the courtroom and you write that at the top of an agreement for me to initial? That should have even went before the judge, but it didn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And even funnier, and it is funny. I don't mean funny like, oh, that's a great joke. I mean, it's sad kind of funny that in my ex's original divorce complaint, as they call it, she was filing for sole custody, pedente light, and post judgment, which means permanently. And when I think about it all, well, my lawyer just handed her sole custody, pedente light. And with even the other lawyers that I had successively, I don't even know why I was a part of it. They just kept accommodating whatever my ex had wanted, if that makes sense. Every time we showed up in court was only to ratify agreements.
So
Usually I didn't find about the agreements. Sorry to cut it off on you, but usually I didn't find about the agreements until I showed up for court for what I thought was going to be a trial or hearing. And then you pop and you're walking down the hallway and they're like, "Oh, we need you to sign this."
So
Well,
I
what's
just
this?
typed in your name on the judicial website just to see kind of like what your docket says. And it looks like it says that your case went to final judgment on July 11th, 2016.
Yep.
And so just scrolling through on your thing here, it looks like on July 11th, 2016, you guys entered a separation agreement and you both agreed, and then the judge granted it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then they
And
a final judgment. So then anytime after 7/11/16 forward was post judgment. So that's the other thing people don't understand is it's not like a regular case where if you have a lawsuit at the end you say, okay, this person has to pay $1 million to this person. It's over. You have your judgment. With family court, you can keep it going for the whole 18 years by just going back every other month and saying motion for contempt, motion to modify, motion for this, motion for that. And this is what they purposefully set people up with agreements that they're going to fail so that they keep coming back, because at the end of the day, it's a business. And I tell people all the time, like, what other business isn't trying to make as much money as possible? None. This isn't a nonprofit. It's a for-profit. They're registered as a business. And everything that they're doing with child support and Title 4D and everything like that, if you don't pay child support, they mark it on your credit report. How can they list it on your credit report if it's not a consumer debt?
our child support agreements didn't go through the normal court processes. We had our own agreements for that. In fact, everything we ended up with was by our own agreements. So we were not under the auspices of the court, under their rule in a way, which makes our case a lot different than most. I understand people even pay child support directly through the courts, and the courts tag on a little just because fee. And they even garnish paychecks when it's not paid, and there's that much oversight. The funny thing is that through the whole of my case, I was begging for the court to be on top of us and to give that kind of oversight. But when I say I was kept out of court, I was even kept out in the hallway, and they were sneaking up through the back way into court to have little hearings and whatnot. And that's not even any BS. And just to tell you something else real quick, I hope you don't mind. I mean, if you want to know, it was in like end of March. My second lawyer, just real quickly, I showed up to court one day. My lawyer comes up to me. She goes, "Oh, did you sign the agreement?" I said, "I told you, I'm not signing any agreement." This was the separation agreement to finalize the divorce. She says, she actually said, "What the big word?" She says, well, what are we doing here if you didn't sign it? I don't know. I came for a trial. And next thing I knew, she went behind doors with the judge, a couple of lawyers, my ex, put me on a leash in the hallway, said, wait. And my lawyer comes out and she goes, well, I hope you're happy. She goes, looks like you're going to get your trial. But as I told you, it won't be with me because I'm just too burned out and I can't do your trial. And you know what I did? I went and got me a third lawyer. And when I got that third lawyer, I said to the lawyer, and I was talking with the lawyer, I says, well, I said, the trial date's been set for about a month. Actually, it was, yeah. The trial date was actually set for about a month originally. And I says, are you going to be able to do this? And the lawyer looked me square in the face and said, a good lawyer knows how to handle that. They handled it real good. Hold on one second. I'm on the phone.
We can
Anyway,
take
sorry about that.
a break if you
No,
need.
that's fine. That's fine. Hold on one second. Mom, I'm on the phone. So what happened next? And I'm being serious. They proceeded forward like we were going to trial. We had depositions. There were a few meetings with the GAL even. Filed a cross complaint that was never filed. And right up to, you said July 11th, 2016. Let me tell you, that was a Tuesday. You can go look it up. And I know that very well because the Sunday morning before, 10 o'clock, like 9 o'clock, my lawyer called me up and says, could you come down to the office because we really need to talk. I go down to the office. I get there for about 10 o'clock. 4 hours, I got grilled about how going to trial would be bad, but every excuse in the book. And they ended up putting a separation agreement in front of me. I'm going to tell you, I try to think what I was thinking that day. I have no idea why I even signed it. If I had been seriously, I'll say it, I was of sound mind. But if things were really clear, I should have ripped that up, walked out of the office and said, I want my hearing. I want my trial. Once I signed that, the only thing that we went to court on July 11th was to ratify that agreement. And I'm going to tell you something pretty interesting. That was the only day that they had allotted. Usually when they have a trial, sometimes 2 days, 3 days. So they were never planning on giving me a trial. And I have many things that I can actually prove and substantiate that fact, because the fact is the lawyers never really prepared. They never contacted witnesses. They never examined and went through the evidences, especially through the discovery, which was never completed. I'll tell you another thing. And when we went in court, ratified that agreement, I actually committed perjury.
How?
I stood up there on the stand, and the judge asked my ex and me a bunch of questions, and one of them was, you agree that all discovery and financial exchanges have been completed? And I was up there going, yep, knowing that that's what my lawyers wanted me to say, because if I didn't say it, then it wouldn't have been finalized. And I know that must sound horrible. Anybody could be hearing me right now going, did he just say he lied? Yes, I lied. Absolutely. That's what my lawyers told me to do. They knew full well that
says perjury or lying, because it's like to your belief and knowledge. And it's like to your knowledge and belief, your lawyer is telling you that this is what you have to say. So,
Yeah.
and they're the one who has the duty, not you. They're the ones who's representing you. So it's their duty to tell you the truth and advocate for you. And these lawyers don't do that.
No,
They only care about getting paid and getting as much money as they can out of people and their desperation.
I have told people, 8 lawyers, for what I had paid them. You want to call it a couple $100,000? I've joked around and I've told people I could have kicked my own rear end for $200,000. I didn't need anybody else to do it. You know, people have this idea that you call a lawyer and automatically they're going to advocate and fight for you 100%, and that even the thought that they would be against you and work against you, it would seem preposterous. And yet this is what I find, not just with me, many others, that their own lawyers are dropping the ball. Their own lawyers are actually the ones that are bending them over to take it. Sorry for the rudeness there, but it's the reality of it.
Yeah,
Even
that's why it's a racket, because it's like, it's not like in a criminal case where, or let's say, for example, a car accident case when there's insurance involved. You hire a lawyer, they'll take care of you, they'll get you your settlement, everything's fine. You hire a lawyer in family court, you expect that you're going to get the service you're paying for, but they just steal your money, promise you all these things, and then they go make backroom deals. And, like with my case, like my ex had a lot of connections with people that maybe I underestimated. And I think you were saying your ex, you found out she had connections too. Did that come up where you realized that maybe people were helping her out or giving her an advantage based on who she's related to?
Yeah. And I mean, also, I can, say, going even before all this started, my ex had various family members that were serving in police and other civil service positions, even the FBI. And as a couple lawyers, as I told you, at whether the first meeting or eventually in subsequent meetings, the conversation went something like, "Oh, by the way, do you know that Rosa DeLaura is your ex's cousin?" Now, for those of you not from Connecticut, Rosa DeLaura is one of our most and finest politicians, and my ex's cousin. And conveniently, her office was the floor above my ex's lawyer. So they knew each other. Can I say 100% for sure that there was some type of involvement? No, I can't. But why wouldn't there be? And for my lawyers to bring it up and in just polite conversation, like, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" It seemed like they were trying to make a point. And
Yeah.
that
You know
alone
what?
right there kind of like puts a bad taste in one's mouth.
Yeah. And you know what? Like,
I'm sorry.
I've heard a lot of people over the years have said that she, doesn't actually use her political office to actually help anybody, and that people have had a lot of negative things to say about her. And I myself had basically written up a proposed federal law called Angelina's Law, named after my daughter Angelina. And I made a petition about it. I made all these things about it. I got lots and lots of people signed petitions about it. And I sent to Rosa DeLaura's office information about it, copies of it, a cover letter, everything. Reached out by email. I got back something saying, "Oh, we received your email. Somebody will be back to you." Nobody ever had the decency to even bother to actually call me. I got an automated response back saying, "Oh, we'll look at it." But then meanwhile, she has time to post on her social media of her going out for the parade and St. Patty's Day in downtown New Haven drinking. So that's okay. But when it talks about child abuse, she can't even answer. She can't even get back to me. And so it's like, and the same with Blumenthal. I reached out to both of them formally through their offices with certified mail. And it's been more than 6 months and they didn't have the decency to get back to me. So I'm just publicly saying that I think that Rosa DeLauro is a disgrace to the state of Connecticut, and these career politicians needs to be removed. And Governor Lamont is also a disgrace because he's the one who looks and sees all of this stuff, and in the executive branch of government has the power to take these people out of office and looks the other way. So that's all I have to say about them. And, you know, it doesn't surprise me that they pushed you around in court with her connections with her family because they think they can just bully people. And if you don't know the laws, if you don't have, it's like they leave you there for 4 hours. They're basically hounding you. At that point, you're just signing just to get out of there. It's like an interrogation. That's the kind of stuff that gets the evidence thrown out. It's a contract isn't valid if you are under duress.
I hear everything that you're saying about the politicians, and I can give many of my own thoughts and opinions on Rosa and Vietnam Dick. Everybody knows about Blumenthal, how he never jumped out of that plane that he claimed to in Vietnam. But anyway, you know, the bottom line, actually, I'm sorry if I get a flush of thoughts here, but something you just said, getting evidence is thrown out of court. I can understand that. But for many of us, those evidence, much like ourselves, have never seen the inside of the courtroom. Like I said, other than to step in to ratify an agreement or, pardon my French, but for some BS type of hearing. And I've talked with many parents through the years, and actually quite a few mothers as well, and different states. And it's the same sentiment. It's the same, many similarities that they don't even feel like they're able to get their foot in the door. It's like that would be the ultimate to actually be heard, for somebody to actually, if this makes sense, for a judge to have the evidences in front of them, for the judge to actually throw out the window. That would be special, in my opinion. But many of the cases are kept very one-sided. You know, in many cases, whether it's custody, divorce, a civil case, whatever, even car accidents, you know, there's all different types of cases. And that's one of the things where having the knowledge and understandings that I have now, if I'm talking to somebody who's more at the beginning of whatever case that they're at, one of the first things I will ask them, I'm like, well, what kind of case do you have? And they have often replied, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, was it explained to you? Adversarial, non-adversarial, litigated, non-litigated, mediated, arbitrated? Any idea? And many have said to me, I never even have heard my lawyer say these things. Contested, uncontested. You'd be surprised to find out just how many different, not only types of cases, but even when they go in to try to agree to what they call ADR, it's alternate dispute resolution. There's actually a quite few more processes that have been added to the list, and recently within the last decade. One of them is actually called collaborative divorce that not many people know of or ever heard of. Even when it comes to divorce, many people understand the label no fault divorce versus fault divorce. But to really understand what these things are, these are all the things that a lawyer is supposed to explain to a client from the beginning. and how we're going to proceed and what we're going to do and how hard the lawyer's going to fight for you. And nope, the lawyers take the case and the lawyers take cases. And I find many people just end up in what I call a maze of nothing but dead ends where they can't even get back to the beginning from where they started. And it's just a long, dragged out process. I believe often the ultimate goal is to make one side submissive and weren't too worn out to even have the will to contest or to want to fight. I've read horror stories, divorces that have gone on longer than I know people that have divorces still going on over 5 years. I read about a divorce that went on for 22 years. Can you imagine? 22 years. I talked to people that, I've actually said to them, I said, well, have they talked about when you're going to get the actual divorce? No, they haven't brought that up yet. Well, that's the whole purpose of what you're in, is to get divorced. And they just keep it going and going.
Well, it's interesting. Like you brought up something before about ADR, and it can take many forms. Like, people can do like a mediation and arbitration, and they can have like, private custody evaluations and then come up with an agreement. Like what you guys did by having your lawyers draft a settlement agreement essentially is ADR. Anything that's not going to litigation is falling under ADR. And a lot of times the lawyers will try to encourage that because it's, it's an easy way to get it done quickly and, avoid the high cost and stress and burden of doing a real trial. But then you get the lawyers who they don't want it to be resolved quickly. If they knew that they can get your case resolved in 1 week and you guys sign an agreement through mediation and it's over and everybody's happy, then there's no more money for them. If they know that they can keep it going for 5-6 years, they're getting paid $500 an hour and they can keep it going as much as they want. Then it's like, why would they want? It's almost like, if a doctor cures you, you're not going to come back and pay him anymore to keep giving you medicine, right? So if a lawyer cures your problem and fixes your problem so you don't have to come to court anymore, you're not going to get paid either. So where's the incentive for them to fix it? Where's the incentive for them to make it resolved? They want to keep the conflict going. If you have a good lawyer, somebody you can trust that looks out for your best interests, which usually that only happens if it's somebody you personally know or a family member or something. Most of these lawyers are snakes. And so I got burned too by my lawyer, Don Cretella from Zingaro and Cretella in New Haven. And he told me he went to law school with the judge.
Oh, that was one of the lawyers I ended up calling, because even though I only had about 8, I did call a whole other handful of lawyers. Yeah, I think you're telling me about him. He was one of the ones that he's like, yeah, I'm going to be busy that day. Here, let me give you another name.
Yeah, and it's like they say that if they know it's like too messy and stuff like that, and like promise me everything. And also, they're not supposed to take like a flat rate retainer. They're not allowed to do that in family court. But he made me sign a flat rate retainer. He said he needed 15 grand up front. The whole thing had to be paid in full up front before he started the representing me. And I was like, can I give you like 5,000 and then you just bill me as a retainer? He's like, nope, I need the 15 grand in full up front or nothing. And he said it was going to include a full trial, because our case had already went to final judgment back in 2019. This was in 2022. So he said we were going to get a trial, and he said he was going to increase the child support. He was going to get all the arrears owed to me. He was going to fix loopholes in our parenting plan. He was going to do all of this stuff. And I paid him the money. And then it's like, he didn't respond to messages. He wasn't answering to my concerns. He was advising me to break the court orders and stuff like that. And then I was like asking for financial discovery, and my ex was giving him like stuff like from his finances. Like my lawyer put in a request saying like all your investment accounts, crypto, bank accounts, all this stuff for the last 3 years. Well, when he would show, like, for example, like Venmo, he blacked out like all of it. He redacted all the financial records. You can't black out the financial records. It's one thing if you're going to black out like a confidential thing, but and then
I don't mean to laugh, but keep going. I'll tell you something funny afterwards.
yeah, and then I asked the lawyer, and I'm like, he's not allowed to do that. And he's like, oh, well, I'm not sure. I have to check. Everything that I told him, I'm not sure. I have to check. And then when I'd ask him, like, oh, I just want to follow up to see if you got an answer about XYZ that you said you were going to check. And then it's like no response, or, oh, no, I haven't heard yet, or whatever. And he's like so incompetent as a lawyer. And I'm like, and then I'm seeing like other people had sued him for malpractice and like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, all this stuff. And like with the financial stuff from whatever he did give us, it was like records showing like an 18-month period from 2021 through 2022. And in that 18 months, through his business and personal bank accounts, I sat there with a highlighter and went through every single line by line of those bank statements, one by one with a highlighter. I entered it in spreadsheets. I categorized it all. And I literally took me weeks to do this by myself. The lawyer didn't do shit, right? So then I made a chart saying like, okay, during the last 18 months, Matthew paid a total of $2,000 in child support. He was supposed to pay much more, but he only paid $2,000, saying he has no income, no money. In the same time period, his bank accounts showed deposits of more than $300,000 going in and more than $300,000 coming out. And it would go in deposits of cash or checks and come out in cash withdrawals from the ATM. And so it would be like cash in, cash out, cash in, cash out, 300,000. And then everything else that he redacted from all the other stuff, and then everything else he didn't show us. And then like he lied and he said on his tax return, he had a construction company. And so in 2021, on his tax return, on his Schedule C, he put that his gross income for the year was like $1,500 gross for the whole year before write-offs. So first he said 1,500, then he did a bunch of write-offs. And his net income was even less. But in that same time period, what he spent at Home Depot from his Home Depot Pro Tools account was like more than 50 grand. So if your gross was 1,500, but you spent 50 grand on materials, how was your gross 1,500? And where'd the rest of that 49,000 come from? And then where'd the other 300 grand that you put in your account come from? And so it's like when I'm bringing this up to my lawyer, meanwhile, my ex is going to the court saying, I don't have any money. I'm broke. Like when I didn't have a lawyer, I went to the child support court and I showed them proof of everything, and they put him in jail and said that he has to pay 3 grand to get out to child support. And so then when I had the lawyer, he's saying, oh, I'll take the money right out of his bank account. Oh, I can sign this. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it came down to it, he's like, oh, they don't put people in jail for not paying, even though they had put him in jail when I was pro se a few months before. And then he's like, oh, well, we'll give him a chance. And then later he's saying, oh, well, would you agree to waiving all the money he owes you if he signs this? I'm like, are you kidding me? You told me we were going to increase the money. He was paying $120 a week. And like based on what he was making, he should have been paying much more. So like he didn't want his child support number to be based off his real income. He wanted to pay nothing. So then he just threatened me and said like, oh, I'm going to make it so I have custody, so you have to pay me child support. And I would just laugh thinking like, how are you going to do that? You don't have a stable place to live. You don't have this. You're telling the court that you have no job and no income and that you can't pay child support. And you think the court's going to give you sole custody? And then on top of it, then my daughter was saying that she was being sexually abused by his son at his house during his parenting time. And even with all that, with him having no stable place to live, saying he has no income, telling the courts he can't pay child support, he doesn't have a job, all this stuff in abuse, they handed him my daughter. So it's like, it doesn't matter if you have a house. It doesn't matter if you live in a nice area and he lives in a dangerous, violent place where there's millions of sex offenders. It doesn't matter because they don't care. They're handing the kid to the abuser, and it's a clear pattern of what they're doing.
Yes, and it becomes very clear, and especially I must say, for people who aren't aware of or have ever been through it, it becomes clearer and clearer until it's too late and everything is lost. You know, what you said before, something about your lawyer appeared incompetent. Yeah, when the lawyer starts appearing incompetent, that's pretty much saying I'm not going to advocate as a zealous advocate for you. I'm not fighting 100%. I'm not going to be that pit bull that I know and do for other clients because I'm a lawyer and I can rip somebody apart. They start just getting all wishy-washy and making hypotheses of what they can do, and yet nothing ends up getting done. Um, and they certainly know how to go around their clients. Just as an example, if you are a single parent and you're seeking custody and you don't work or you work very little, then they'll throw the money issue in your face. How are you going to support your child if you do not bring in that kind of money and are able to pay? Da, da, da. And then on the other hand,
I didn't even question my ex about that. He literally testified saying he said he owed $5,000 to his ex-wife and $6,000 to me in back child support. Yeah. So he owed $11,000 in arrears, and he told them that he can't pay, and he hasn't paid in months because he has no income and no job and no money. And the same day she transferred custody to him, sole custody, said that now he's going to have full sole responsibility for a 4-year-old girl. So in theory, they're supposed to say, yeah, you're not financially stable, you can't have sole custody. But in reality, they'll give the kid to somebody who is violent, abusive, dangerous, has no money. I've seen people who are living in a hotel or a car get sole custody. But
I actually can substantiate that.
I had a nice house in the suburbs, and she got taken to a ghetto area, excuse my language, but that's what it is. And I worked hard to get a house in an area where I felt like it was going to be not having shootings every 5 minutes and stuff like that, for a little girl to feel safe to go outside and ride her bike,
I do know. And just to finish what I was saying, you could have a parent that works 3 jobs, brings in all the money, and then the lawyer's telling them, oh, but you're so busy. When are you going to have time for the kid? They always jump from one extreme to the other, sometimes whatever suits their manipulation, whatever they want to go and manipulate. You're too busy, you're too poor, you're too rich, you're too... And when lawyers start doing that, I hate to say it, but just like after I got rid of a couple lawyers, people are like, well, how many lawyers do you think you're going to go through? Damn, if I could go back to the beginning of it, I think at the end of the first month, I would have been on like number 50. I would have been firing and hiring them within the first hour the minute I suspected anything out of line. Because to tell you the truth, it's the most horrendous feeling in the world from the very beginning when they shake your hand and they give you some kind of hope of what they're going to do. And the next thing you know, months are going by and you're going nowhere. You're getting nowhere. And then the ultimate is that they're not going to do anything other than what they've already had in mind. Clearly, what they're have agreed on, or whatever the algorithm is that they're going by. Real quick, something funny. You mentioned about the discovery and blacking out.
Yeah.
So my ex didn't provide all the discovery. Nope. And what all the statements and everything, by the way, that's all described. Every state has a practice book that describes all the procedures. It tells you what you have to turn over, credit card statements, banking statements, income taxes, you name it. It's in there. How many years? So my ex was blacking all hers out. Well, for some reason, when I was getting them through email for me to inspect, I did a lot of self-service, which was kind of interesting. Even filling out financial affidavits, I'm paying these people. I used to make an analogy. I'm pulling into a high-priced gas station. It should be full service pump, and I'm the one that's pumping the gas, and I'm doing all the work. I'm doing all the detective work. I'm discovering everything, and I'm putting in front of my lawyers, and they're squinting like they're blind. I don't see it. I don't see it. But my ex tried blacking everything out. Well, it was funny because the reader on my email, I guess, when the documents would come up, all the black would be transparent. I could look at everything she was trying to black out. And I'm saying, this is like, you got to be kidding me. You went through all that trouble, and these lawyers don't realize that sometimes, you know what I'm saying? To block out all the information that I already know. I mean, we were married together.
And then you know exactly what she was trying to hide, the stuff that she tried to black out.
Yeah, well, here's just like an example. If somebody, some people give nicknames to their accounts like checking.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to call your checking account by numbers and label them 1, 2, 3, 4, and you only hand over 2 and 4, there might be a 1 or 2 that you haven't given over yet. And I go to give that to my lawyer, and they're like, "Oh, maybe she likes even numbers." You're like, maybe you're part of my French. You look at this and go, "You got to be kidding me! You really got to be kidding!" And her lawyer, oh, this was even best, was accusing me that I wasn't turning over all my discovery because I had credit card statements where I had paid the credit card off and not used them for 3-4 months. And when that happens, the credit card companies, if you pay off a credit card and you don't have any activity for a couple months, they may not send you a statement. So I did, for several cards, I didn't have any statements. Her lawyers filing contempt motions in the court that I'm not turning over my discovery. I had to call the credit card companies. I had to get letters from them to give to my attorneys and telling them I had no balance. There is no statement. It does not exist. And that woman kept coming after me. And I turned everything over. I turned over the dollar bills I had in my pocket. And my ex wasn't even filling out the correct affidavit form. She was making a makeshift worksheet on Microsoft Word that I swear to God, any accountant would even have trouble finding and trying to add things up. And I happen to be a math teacher. I happen to have an engineering degree, and I happen to have a brain. So when people want to start playing around with numbers, like you said, it doesn't add up. When you start putting numbers down that I can easily go and do a little calculating and divide by 365 or by 12 and go, oh, isn't it convenient how well these numbers actually calculate to exact monthly numbers? Because real numbers aren't exact. Like you said, you're only bringing in so much money, you got all these expenses, you're claiming that you're broke.
Yeah, but then meanwhile, his statements are showing that he's going out to eat every day, spending money on liquor stores and entertainment and all that stuff, and all these premium services on dating apps and Netflix and all these Amazon purchases. And so it's like, you're saying you're broke, but where's the money coming from? And if he was smart, he would have reported that he made 300 grand gross and then put all these expenses, but he literally doesn't care. He thinks he can get away with anything because usually he does. And so, same thing with me. It's like, I felt like I was doing all the legwork. I was digging through all the discovery and telling the lawyer what this shows. And then when we would go to court, he wouldn't show me anything. And I felt like because I was so broke at the time and like 15 grand. I put that on a high interest credit card because I didn't have that money. So it's like, I just paid because I was desperate. But then it's like, as soon as I paid, he just stopped caring. He told me, he said he didn't care about me. He said all this mean stuff to me. And I wanted to fire him, but I felt like because I already paid 15 grand, that I wanted to get at least some value out of it. And that if I fired him, I would get nothing out of it, because then when I tried to ask him for an accounting of my, my case or whatever to see what he was charging me, he said that he charged me like 20 grand already and that it was capped at the 15. So he was trying to say like, oh, I already spent the entire retainer. And the only thing that he did was show up to like 2 hearings where it was like we were there for like less than 30 minutes each time. And then he did 2 depositions where the first one lasted like 10 minutes. The second one was like an hour. And after the deposition, it said in the middle of it that him and my ex went into his office and had a private conversation off the record. And when I asked what the private conversation was about, and this was after, like, in the deposition, he's telling my lawyer that the lawyer's like, oh, where'd this 7,000 cash deposit come from? He's like, oh, I don't remember. Oh, where'd this 10,000 deposit come from? So the lawyer knows he has money. Then he goes and has this private conversation. Then next thing you know, he comes back and then ends the deposition after that. And then it's like his whole tune changed. And then it's like, I felt like he was doing a bad job on purpose to try to get me to fire him. Because that's what they do. Like, they'll do a terrible job on purpose. And then if you try to bring it up, they'll say, okay, well, I'm just going to file a motion to withdraw. Or you know what, maybe we're just going to go our separate ways. Because then it's a reason for you to fire them. Because otherwise they have to ask the court to let them leave you.
Well, yes. And there's a formal process for that. But through all my doings and everything they did with me and my understandings, there's many ways, but I agree with what you're saying. They're basically dropping the ball, and the law says they're not supposed to drop the ball. A lawyer is supposed to act as a zealous advocate for their clients, going after the same results that the client would want or any other normal or reasonable person, unless there's some outstanding reason. The lawyer cannot be made to break laws. The lawyer cannot knowingly let their clients break laws. And the lawyer has to believe that their client is competent. And if the lawyer does not believe in the competency of their client, then the law says, check this out, they are allowed to resume a normal client relationship and not act as zealous advocates. So basically, they can keep you from falling off the edge of the cliff, but they'll let you dangle for a little while, if that makes sense. And I want to just add another thing, too. Sometimes we call them attorneys. Don't call them attorneys. Let's call them lawyers, because there's that key word, law. Whether the lawyer is acting competent, whether they act appearing to break the law, I've come to an understanding. They know the laws quite well. They know how to push the envelope. They know how to go around them. But there aren't lawyers out there, believe me, that are knowingly just breaking laws. They're acting under the law in every, even shady thing that they do. You may find that as a surprise. And when they come to that point where they can't get their client to play ball, bend over, whatever you want to call it, yeah, then they start whether ghosting or being impossible, just so that the hope is that the client will go find another lawyer. Now, I know what you said, the lawyer has to withdraw. No, a client in Connecticut, especially, can go get a new lawyer. The new lawyer files what they call an in lieu of appearance. And that's actually a withdrawal for the other lawyer and a replacement for the new lawyer.
Yeah, but that's the same as you firing them. I'm saying, like, if you say, no, I'm not going to, let's say your lawyer starts doing a shitty job and they're being bad on purpose in hopes that you're going to fire them. And you say, no, I'm not going to fire you because I paid you 50 grand and you promised me this. You better do what I said. The lawyer has one choice at that point if you're not going to fire them, and that is to file a motion to withdraw. unless they trick you into filing a motion in lieu of them, which is what Cretella did to me ultimately at the end. He said to me that he was only going to give me my file if I signed a motion in lieu, an appearance in lieu of him. And
Yep, exactly.
And then after I did the appearance in lieu of him, he refused to give me back the file. So he played me. And now it's been 2 years and I still don't have my file. And no other lawyer would touch the case without the prior file. And the financial discovery, the judge put in an order saying that I'm never allowed to look at it, to see it, to disperse it, to talk about it or anything ever again. But first of all, I'm not going to listen to an order like that because it's illegal. And second of all, it's my right to have the financial discovery. And they kept trying to hide it. And that's why it's like,
it's the law.
I know it's the law. But it's,
You are allowed listen to this. Just, I'm going to try to cut you off. You are allowed your entire file. A lawyer.
And how am I going to get it from him? Should I go grab it out of his hands if he won't give it to me? That's the thing. The law can say whatever you want. But if there's nobody there to enforce the law, then it means nothing.
This is kind of like a point that I've been kind of making. You know, they're telling you, oh, you got to go get your file. You can't get your file. The lawyer's saying, well, if I don't have the file, you got to be kidding me, because I had 8 lawyers and they all got the file from the subsequent lawyer. You see what I mean? It's not
by law. When you end your relationship with a lawyer, by law in the state of Connecticut, they have to give you back your file upon request. Your whole file, including notes, everything. They have to give it back to you. I asked for it back. He refused to give it back to me. Then he filed a motion in the court saying he's not giving it back without permission from the judge. And then the judge ordered saying that the only way I could ever get my file back is if he gives it to another lawyer, that it will only be released to another lawyer.
I'm saying.
But that's illegal because, number one, no lawyer will touch my case. Number two, I can't afford a lawyer. Number three, there's no right to a lawyer and there's no guarantee to have one. So you're saying it must be with a lawyer, but you're not saying I'm guaranteed to have a lawyer. So basically now that's why I can't ever have my file.
And what you're describing, just a little while ago, I used the term a maze of endless dead ends. You hit one dead end after another. You get a new lawyer, that lawyer should call the lawyer up, have the file transferred over, and it should be that simple. By the way, lawyers don't have to hand over the complete and total file. They are actually allowed under law to keep any part that might incriminate them in anything. There is something to it. I don't remember the exact of it, but they're supposed to hand over everything, the discovery, the financials, the agreements, transactions, even what do you call them? When they give you monthly billings, I can't think of the term.
Invoices.
Thank you very much. You know, all I'm hearing what you're describing, it's BS. It's complete BS. And even for the judge, it doesn't matter. You're entitled to your case file.
I know. And every single thing that they've done is completely illegal. And so like, that's why it's like people say, well, the law says this, the law says that. And I'll say it again, the law means absolutely nothing unless somebody is enforcing it. And just like what you said before, when you were listing off all the rules of professional conduct for attorneys, those rules also mean nothing because the enforcement body of those rules is the Connecticut Bar Association, which is made up of lawyers and they're all buddies and it's a small state and a small circle. And so, you know, I made a bar complaint, a grievance against Don Cretella, and I included 2,000 pages of attached evidence. And they wrote back saying that I didn't have any evidence and that he didn't do anything wrong and dismissed my complaint. So that's the thing. It's like, if there's no punishment and if there's no consequences for them violating the law and violating people's rights and stealing people's money, and when people try to complain or sue them, the judges dismiss the lawsuits, the complaints get thrown out, and the people get blacklisted and retaliated against, nobody in the future is going to say, oh, I shouldn't hire that lawyer because I'm going to get burned, because there's no record that that lawyer did something wrong. It's like
Because
all secret because they protect each other. And even when you try to sue them, the judges are going to cover for them. And if you try to go in pro se, they discriminate against you. If you have another lawyer, that lawyer makes a deal behind your back, and it's like you can't trust any of them.
and it does jive with what I kind of been saying. If you do not get your foot in any courtroom, you're not going to get hurt. So you could have all the evidences, you could have mountains of evidences, and you might find that lawyer that's willing to get you into that courtroom. And if they want, they know how to blackball that lawyer too, because they have their own way of doing things. And it's sad, it's not right, it's illegal. You're absolutely right. But it's happening for somebody to, everything you're saying, I believe me, I feel 100% for you. I know everything what you're describing and what you're going through, as many others. And I've tried to talk to many people, and I've told them, I go, look, you've tried everything in your power, short of writing to the president of the United States, short of contacting every possible agency out there. And all that's happening is, and I don't mean, I try not to sound the wrong way. You're just spinning your wheels in the mud. You're not going anywhere. And like I said, you're caught in this endless maze. It just dead ends. And everywhere you turn and go, they seem to just block people. And I hate to say it, but parents going through this, people, families even, health starts to deteriorate mentally, physically. A lot of these lawyers, you know what? It's one bit, they treat it like it's one big joke. I could tell you some of the things that my lawyers did and mocked me. Even at one point, I wanted to bring DCF. We never had child services because we were never really in court. I mentioned DCF one time. I had two lawyers that were sitting there. They were laughing at me. They were like, "Oh, you want to bring DCF in? Oh my God!" And I was like, they're laughing. One lawyer got mad at me because I told the GAL, I said, my ex is a pathological liar. The GAL got up and left. My lawyer's in the room, and he made it sound like I said something wrong or did something wrong. And he's pantomiming like he's at the plate. He's like, you know what? He goes, here's you. He goes, you're at the plate. He goes, and you struck out. And then he motioned like he was going to hit me over the head with his invisible baseball bat. I'm standing there and I'm saying, this is not happening. Like I purposely would call somebody a pathological liar just because. This is a lawyer that's supposed to be on my side. And, I don't mean to get too far off of the track, but we hire these people to defend us, to take us through these troubled waters. They should let us know from the beginning what our chances are. Is it reasonable? Do we have a case? Do we? No,
that's part of the scam. They tell you from the beginning that we can't guarantee anything. Nothing is guaranteed. It can go any way. I'll try my best, but nothing is guaranteed. They all say that, and it's like the script, because it's like a disclaimer. Like, yeah, I can try this motion, but I can't guarantee it's going to be granted. I can try doing this, but I can't guarantee any results. So if you're paying somebody with no guarantee of the results, it's like you're gambling. Versus if you're pro se and you're taking care of the case yourself, nobody's going to fight as hard as you are. And anytime that I've been successful was without lawyers. Every time I had lawyers, I was unsuccessful.
I know one person. She was actually very successful. She has her kid back. And I know a couple that are making headway, but it's been very difficult. But they are acting with the same professionalism and intelligence as a seasoned lawyer. And it's a battle, absolutely. but also I do know a few people who have made up their minds to go pro se, and anybody thinks that they're just going to show up in the courtroom and say, "Your Honor, I'm right." The judge isn't going to go, "Oh, you are? Oh, good. So I'm so glad you told me that. Here, you win." No, I'm sorry, it's not that easy. Going pro se and going up to these lawyers that are seasoned professionals. I mean, seriously, I hear what you're saying. You have a chance to make a lot more progress because these lawyers are working against their own clients. They are hindering their clients' due process rights. I mean, you said you were looking at my docket. We could sit down and go through the docket. I'll show you so many wrongs in that docket. Things that were not normal. Anyway, I had another thought I'm trying to get back to. You know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think, like,
let me say this. Let me say this. Because I do my best. I try to, when I talk to others, especially parents, you know, I try to give them a heads up as to where I think it's going, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, to try to help them find a little peace in their mind, because some people end up going just mad over the desperation, the not being informed, uh, feeling like they're being sabotaged. But, you know, in many ways, it's almost like your house is on fire and you call the fire department and they come and start throwing gasoline on it. Sound right? Okay, I'll make another one. You go to a doctor and your doctor says, "We found out what's wrong with you. We got to cut your arm off." Oh, okay, here, let me jump on the table, get the saw out, doc. That's it. Got to cut my arm. What are my chances of living? Oh, 20%. All right, let's do it. You're kidding me, right? It's called being informed. It's called being, I'll say it again, being informed, being what all the options are, getting
that's like kind of like what I was getting at before, where, like, a lot of this is like contract law, where if you're not taking it to litigation and it's relying on making a deal, making an agreement, both people have to have informed consent. So if you signed under duress, or because you were coerced, or you were threatened, or you were bribed, or you were scared, or whatever reason it is, that wasn't because you fully understood what you were signing and you fully agreed to it, and nobody pushed you to agree, including your lawyer. If you can say that, and they're supposed to ask you in the court, and like early on, like, back in 2016, when I was in court, they would say, like, have you had a chance to look at this agreement? Is anyone forcing you to do this? If you do know you have the right to an attorney and a trial, if you want to come back, you can. Otherwise, you have to show that you're consenting to this. And they would like ask us and like shove it down our throats to make sure that they put that on the record that they asked us. So then when you say, yes, I agree, you gave them your consent. So if they're, from what you're describing, using coercion and fraud and threats and bribes and stuff like that to get people to agree to things that they don't want to agree to, they're breaking federal laws. They're doing serious crimes, and really what it is racketeering. And you mentioned earlier about, like, with other cases, like, look at these high profile cases like the Diddy trial, and there was a Johnny Depp trial, and all these big celebrities. You never see violations of due process when it's a national televised trial, because the judges are on their best behavior, because the is watching. If the TV cameras were watching every court case, there'd be a lot less fraud happening, because then the public doesn't let anything get past them. So the public scrutinizes what happens. And so if the public was able to actually see these proceedings, which by law, these are supposed to be open to the public, and they don't stream them online, they're hiding this stuff. A lot of this stuff is happening under seal, off the record. And so that's another part of the problem.
Oh, a lot of the cases have what they call no judge sitting on the bench, which means different hearings or any type of court goings on are being heard from different judges, kind of like a Frankenstein case. When you have a serious litigated case, one judge is assigned, and that judge hears it all the way through, usually. Now, real quickly, I want to something because I said I forgot something. Being a little bit older, things slip my mind. You know, my lawyer, sorry, my ex, told me that every one of my lawyers was screwing me over and how bad she felt for me, that they were screwing me over. I remember my second lawyer, I'll make this very short. You know, I told her, I said, well, my ex said that you were very mean to her. And this was at court one of the days. And I remember the lawyer looked at me and she goes, oh, I'm mean to her. She was at my office the other day. I let her use my bathroom. I feel like that went for a slip. Oh, she was at your office the other day. You let her use the bathroom. Where was I? Oh, that's so nice. Really? You lawyers aren't.
What about Erica Tyndall?
Judge Tyndall. Oh,
What did
she's
she
a
do?
sweetheart. She's a sweetheart.
Didn't she
Well,
violate your HIPAA privacy
well,
rights on the record?
well, I guess you can call it that in a way. And you know, it was one time we had this hearing in court. I can't even tell you what we were at that day in court, what we were even there to try to determine. But for some reason, they just started calling witnesses from both sides at random, and they happened to put my mother up on the stand, as I told you. And the lawyers questioned my mother, both sides, and then afterwards, the judge turned to my mother and says, "Mrs. Forgione, I hear you make the best meatballs ever." And I'm sitting there, I told you, at the table, and I look up and I'm like, well, my mother does. I'm like, how does this judge know my mother makes the best meatballs? And so I thought that was pretty odd. And like I told you, my mother, being good-hearted, actually invited the judge to come over and said, if you want to come over for dinner one day. And I thought that was pretty special. Well, the short of it is that it was a couple weeks later, I had gone to a regular doctor visit, and I was talking with my doctor, and he asked me how things were going. And he goes, you have Judge Tyndall in your case? And I looked at him and I said, yeah, how do you know? Oh, she's one of my clients. Oh, I'm like, and my name came up, did it? Yeah, wow. Isn't that kind of special? And, you know, even I had gone, like I told you, I went back and I talked to my lawyer, and I'm like, I'm like, did you know Judge Tyndall sees the same doctor as I do? And she's like, oh, yeah. Wait, what? I'm always the last to
Everybody else knew, and then
I'm always the last to find these things out. You know, my doctor, and God bless him. You know, he's a good man. Can't fault him. I can't say he was doing anything wrong on purpose, but but he's like, you want me to talk to her and put a good word in? And I said, who? With who? And he's like, before he could bring a name out, I said, with who? And I think he got the understanding. That was my way of saying we shouldn't even be having this conversation. You're not even supposed to tell me the name of another patient that you have.
Yeah, and in all reality, how did she know that you were his doctor too, unless he said that? He's the one who probably told her that you were his patient. How else would she know?
Things that make you go, you know, I had a lot of those in my case. You know, whoa, you know, you know, through the whole of even when mine first started, I swear to God, I thought I was in like some kind of nightmare. I could not believe it was blowing my mind. So many things that were just not right, didn't seem right. And, I want to add something too. My ex, who had filed this divorce and that restraining order with every accusation, I'm serious when I say this, they were ridiculous. They were ridiculous. One of the accusations was, and this actually happened. I came home one night, I tripped over a shoe that was by the coffee table in the living room. I actually stumbled. She caught me, so I gave her a hug at the same time. And then now I know she's telling everybody that I basically was trying to hit her, but she's not so sure. And she actually put in the restraining order as one of these things that she's listing. Although he claims he tripped over a shoe. Well, yeah, that's what actually happened. I tripped over a shoe. And she's trying to say that I was enacting some type of abuse. And I even went over that list of everything she was accusing. Um, I offered every scenario uh, behind every accusation that she had made. I mean, she accused me of keeping a cordless drill on the counter pointed in her direction in the living room to intimidate her. A cordless drill. I was doing work in the living room at the time. I didn't point it at her. I just had it up on the table, on the counter or whatever. It was like a little half counter there. But, the whole thing, um, that as all these things come up and you're talking to your lawyers about them, then they show no interest in what I guess we could call the truth or the other side of the story. And then I found out this was actually about 6 months later. I found out my ex actually made recordings of me. Yes, she made recordings of me. Um, Long story short, the year before the divorce started and everything, there were many times in the house where I was getting a little loud and I wouldn't say having arguments, but I was loud. And most of that was because we were getting screwed over by an investment company. And that was the majority of that conversation. And my ex didn't seem like she could care less about it. It was actually, I know it's going to sound crazy, it was kind of a little Ponzi scheme that I uncovered that was going on. But anyway, so apparently she had been recording me for 6 months. So when the whole thing came out with Johnny Depp's case, that kind of like hit home with me. And the funny part is, none of my lawyers, they would hand me 13 CDs. None of them told me what it was on there that was so bad. None of them would hear them. None of them would go over them with me. And I told every lawyer, and I did, I said, I'm pretty sure I can recount everything that ever came out of my mouth. And because we were having difficulties as well, there were things that I was trying to find out that were being kept from me. I actually told my lawyers, I said, I would love for the judge to hear all the tapes so that they can see some of the things that I was questioning, trying to find out why my kid at 7 years old was still wearing diapers and sleeping in a crib, and the doctors were okay with that. A lot of different things. Why my ex was always broke in her checking account when she was a medical coder. I told my lawyers, I said, do you want to put those tapes and those recordings in court? I said, you got my blessing. They were having, I told you when I got my third lawyer, remember I told you, I said I had to get a lawyer because the second lawyer said, you got your trial?
Mm-hmm.
My ex's lawyer never listed those recordings as evidence. And that's a fact because there was nothing on them. There was nothing at all. And in all the readings, and I had to, one of the things that I learned after months I needed to become informed. I needed answers. I needed to understand what the exact procedures were. You can't just record somebody and go hand it into court. It doesn't work that way. There actually has to be that, especially recordings, they have to be verified. You have to have actual hearing to verify and determine that that is the purpose, the person. And it has to be accompanied with a written, almost like narrative that goes along with it. You can't just record somebody and then play it. They're supposed to want to know what state, where did it take place, the living room, the back room, what time. It's got to be detailed. It's not that easy. And just real quickly, it also came to my understanding that if somebody's claiming certain things and saying, I recorded it, you can't just pop up in divorce courts and say, here, I got these recordings from months ago and now I want to use them. No, even like with the Johnny Depp situation, a person who feels that they are in some time of danger or whatever the complaint, you can't use evidences as leverage in a divorce case, if that makes sense. In this case, they were trying to use whatever she had recorded as leverages out of the case to try to influence or to scare me off like she had something. And the reality was that I knew myself well enough that
Sounds like blackmail.
in a way it was. And like I said, every one of my lawyers, and I know anybody that could possibly be hearing me right now, they could be going, oh, I don't know. But I got to a point where I don't need to over explain or justify. In fact, it was funny. The GAL had even talked to my therapist at the time, and my therapist told me, the GAL said, asked me if I had heard those recordings, which my therapist knew all about. I told her everything. And I said, and this was actually right before we were going to have that trial. And I says, well, what did he tell you? He says, well, he said they were pretty bad. Oh, I said, things specific? She's like, no. I'm like, said they were pretty bad. This is the GAL that was also filed as a plaintiff attorney on my exercise. Hello. I told you about that one, huh? They call that a jack of all trades. He's a plaintiff lawyer. He's a GAL. He's a mediator, and he'll come and cut your grass. I'm sorry. Wow. I don't mean to make fun because it's not something to make fun of, but it's a ridiculousness. You want to talk about lawyers that do break the laws or bend them. It's wrong. You can't file as a plaintiff lawyer and be a GAL and be a mediator and be positioned on one side.
And then he's sending you a bill at the end of the month for it.
Not only is he sending me a bill, and I'll just give the short of it. I know I have a little problem with being brief. He's billing us at the rate of a lawyer for $450. And I'm pretty sure that the going rate was about $225. So he's billing us double. So basically my half actually takes care of the whole bill. Like I'm some kind of idiot. I know that. I believe that to be true.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. A lot of people say these GALs, like, they never gave us one. And even with so many complaints of abuse and neglect and all of that, you would think they would give a GAL. Nope, they didn't, because they knew that the GAL would see the abuse and say something. So instead, they refused to let us have a GAL. So it's like so much blatant fraud in my case. And I think too, because like when there's no lawyers involved, they think they can just push you around. They think nobody's going to find out what they do. If you try to talk about it online, they silence you and discredit you and try to shift the narrative. But it's like, I think more people are starting to speak out. And like in Connecticut alone, I have now with your name, I've spoken to at least 22 different people from Connecticut alone that have said their stories about dealing with corruption and fraud going on in the judicial system.
When professionals, especially in authority positions, such as lawyers, police, politicians, etc., etc., when they act on their own behalf and outside of the
Jurisdiction.
their jurisdiction and what they're allowed, um, there's a term for it. It's actually called going rogue. Hold on one second. I'm on the phone. Sorry about that. It's called going rogue, and it's actually to give it a very quick, understandable description. You basically believe you're godlike. You believe that you are your own ultimate authority. Can't be questioned. And a lot of them, it just, I think, comes from that they just keep getting away and going unchecked after unchecked after unchecked. Kind of like a bully that keeps bullying. He never gets a good beating, so he keeps getting bullied. He keeps bullying and bullying and bullying, and maybe that's not a great example.
Or if it's like every time they report the bully to the principal, they don't punish him. He gets let go with a warning every time. He's going to say, "Okay, I can do whatever I want, and I'll get away with it." Kind of like when the police don't arrest these guys for domestic violence, and the women, then they get killed.
And then I think they even can develop like an overdeveloped ego where you believe that you're kind of infallible. You believe that you're untouchable. And some of them have the clout and the connections that's how they do pull it off. No, and it's not right by any means. I would tell anybody from the very beginning, you're the client, but the reality is you're in charge. The lawyer works for you. You have the right to ask all the questions you want. Real professionals in any field don't get angry when they are asked legitimate questions. That's a red flag right there. If you ask a professional, they start getting all belligerent and upset and irritated. It means you struck a nerve. There should be no reason to ask that many questions if a professional lawyer sits down with the client, especially one that has no knowledge or understanding of certain goings on or what's going to be going on, and explains things and then say, okay, here's our options, A, B, C, D. We might do this, we might do that. Would you? And you put it right in the client's lap. You put the control. But the reality is they're taking the control away from people. They literally take over and they're going to do what they want. That's what's happening in too many cases.
Yeah, definitely. And like that's kind of like how lawyers were acting with me. Like they're saying like, "Oh no, you either do it my way or nothing." But it's like you said, you're their boss. You're hiring them, so they're supposed to be doing what you tell them. So it's like I think a lot of times many lawyers are doing that, where they're just trying to call the shots, and even if the person doesn't understand, they're doing it anyways, which is wrong.
In Connecticut, and I'm just saying, because my experience was because it was divorce. And actually, I just want to say a lot of divorce cases, they actually split it into two cases. They divide it into finances and custody. My custody, or should I say the custody in my case, was already definitely predetermined that my ex was going to have it, and that was the final be all end all. The default judgment in Connecticut is not joint custody. It's what they call joint legal custody. That's another thing where lawyers take advantage of their clients because they know clients don't have a full understanding of what custody is. and especially the two main parts, the legal and the physical and the legal custody, the right to make decisions and the right to care for your child in your own home. And the physical custody is a lot more important than the legal custody. A lot of people don't understand. Um, and they mince the words up. They're like, oh, but you have joint legal custody. Aren't you happy? You have joint legal custody. Oh, but I don't have physical custody. So I have actually a half of a half, which actually it turns out to not even a quarter. And, you know, I don't want to make fun. I don't want to come across as taking things lightly, but it's almost like Star Wars. It's like they're trying to pull a Jedi mind trick. It's like you don't want the physical custody. Those aren't the droids you're looking for, and you're just sitting there like, oh, really? Oh, I didn't know. And tell me, why would anybody pay for a lawyer to screw them? Does that make any sense?
Exactly. So it's like, but then when you go in there without a lawyer, they're biased against you and treat you different. And so it's like you either pay all this money for a lawyer to screw you over, or you go do it yourself and then you still get screwed over because they don't want to let you have a level playing field. And then the judge will just try to hijack the case and do what they did in mine. But I mean, all of this stuff is getting worse and worse. And like, just like you, I was in the New Haven court from 2015-16 was when I first started until now. And so it's been 10 years. And since COVID forward, it's gotten progressively worse and more corrupt.
Absolutely.
And I feel like it's just getting really, really bad to the point where like, okay, if there's lawyers that have bribed judges in the past to secure custody and stuff like that, and they get away with it, and then they keep doing it every year and they keep getting away with it, are they going to stop doing it, or are they going to do it 10 times more because they know that even if someone reports them to the police, even if they get reported to the bar, even if they get sued, they have connections with the police, they have connections with judges, they have connections with the bar. They can pull strings and make it so that that case gets corruptly thrown out like they did with me. And so it's like, you could be making all the right arguments. You could have the law on your side, the facts on your side. You can memorize the book like I did. And it doesn't matter because if they have their mind made up and they're going to break the law, they don't care. And then they hide under immunity. And just like you said with your ex, they knew she was going to get custody. They just tried to convince you that you didn't even want custody. They tried to trick you into agreeing and giving up your rights without realizing and all this stuff. But it's like, okay, even if you went to trial, you probably still would have won because they already had it made up, like you said.
Well, one thing, when you're going to trial, you actually have to serve the other side that cross complaint. I found out somebody forgot to serve it. Little things like that actually end up causing mistrials in real court cases. But, another thing too, just as an example, I remember one of the first separation agreements that they had sent me, the GAL, acting as Mr. Mediator. I remember reading the opening paragraph, and in there it said, this isn't necessarily what each party wants, but it's where we're at. And I read all the terms and conditions. And basically, after I read it, I said to myself, son of a B, I said, this isn't what both party wants. I go, this is exactly what my ex wants. Even at one point, without going into long of it, my son had gotten a therapist, or my ex had gotten my son a therapist, and we were both going to some of the the appointments. And without rehashing the whole of it, my ex is sitting there and basically told the therapist that the the courts have given her indirect supervision over me. Indirect supervision? What's that? What's indirect supervision? That I can only see my son in public places and my ex is allowed to wait in the parking lot and play supervisor? I wonder if that sounds weird at all. In fact, a couple times I actually offered her to come inside and eat with us so my kid isn't staring out at the window. There was even one time the judge had accused me that could be very harassing to do something like that. I was like to invite my ex to come inside and eat, and I'm going to pay for the bill. I was like, okay, I guess. I was like, I don't know, but if you're going to supervise somebody, wouldn't you want to be right there at the table as versus waiting in the parking lot? I mean, am I making some kind of sense, or is it just intimidation tactics?
Wow.
Because narcissists love any type of control.
Yeah, your ex definitely used her connections to advantage her in your case. It's obvious.
You know, they have different ways of actually awarding sole custody. They don't have to say a person has sole custody. They could say a person has joint legal custody with what they call final say so, which means if there's any disagreements, then the party with the final say so has the overall authority to just overrule the other parent. And that's actually a fancy way of saying sole custody. Now, a narcissistic type person, if you actually said to them, which would you prefer, sole custody or joint legal with final say so? That narc is going to go right for that joint custody with final say so because that's what they love. They love to have that final say so and total control of the situation, knowing that they're going to get exactly what they want. And that's the ability to keep things behind closed doors so that they continually take stabs and sabotage, because that's what they do.
Yeah, and I
If the
think a lot
court,
of people in Connecticut don't really understand like the difference between sole legal and sole physical custody, because like technically the way Connecticut defines it is legal custody means you can make medical, educational, and religious decisions for the child, like major decisions.
yep,
And so if it was like life or death to pull a plug and your child's on life support and one person has sole legal, then if you're in the hospital, you need to get that other parent on the phone. You're not able to make the call. Versus if you had joint legal and final decision making and a disagreement, then you would be able to have the same exact authority. And then the other thing is legal guardian, parental rights. People don't realize that everything they're doing in the family court is fake. When they talk about physical custody, legal custody, it's something the family court made up. The real custody is determined in probate court. And in probate court, you can terminate somebody's parental rights. And if your parental rights are terminated, then you don't have to pay child support. You have no more rights to that kid ever again. So in Connecticut, even if you lose custody in family court, if your parental rights are intact, you still have all of these rights. And so like a lot of people think, like, I have no rights, I lost custody, but whatever. But unless your parental rights have been terminated, you're considered that child's legal guardian under the law.
but if I also may have, it's actually what I call.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if
Can you hear me now?
it sounds a little bit muffled.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Okay. I was saying there's actually what I would call a third side to the coin. And as you said, parental rights, that comes from the Constitution under federal law. And it's actually a biological parent's rights. Even with schools, a lot of people just saying, a lot of parents never heard of FERPA, Fundamental Educational Rights of Parents Act, something like that. The right, and what it all falls under is the Constitution, which says that you're a biological parent. You have the right to know, even if the states say you don't have the right to make decisions. Fine, you still have the right to know about your child. You have the right to access information about your child.
Yeah, and in Connecticut, it says even a non-custodial parent has the right to all medical and educational records of their child. So like me, I have my parental rights. I try to reach out to doctors and school for my daughter, public school, and they're denying me records, saying, no, we can't give you any records without the father even though I'm saying, look, the law says you have to give it to me. And they're like, oh, too bad, we're not giving it to you without a court order. And then it's like, I have no choice but to sue them now because they're making it clear that they're not going to follow the law and they don't care.
If you were to look up, and I think I remember it.
I literally cite the laws. I trust me.
There's something called the Buckley Amendment, and it pertains to non-custodial access when it comes to schools. I used to teach high school. I was a teacher for 14 years. I got out of it back in 2014. Actually, long story. It just got a little bit too tough. I was teaching math. But I could tell you this much, and even through all the parents that I talk to, when it comes to doctors, education, all of them, none of them, as it seemed to me, have a clear understanding of the laws, of parenting rights. And you know what? They're all just worried about covering their asses. That's all it is. And the minute that they hear that one parent, oh, he has sole custody, that's it. If that parent wants them to shut up to the other parent and not, they're not going to go and look in and say, oh, well, we have an understanding of parenting rights. And
well, then they can't say that they're trying to cover their ass and worried about liability if they're blatantly breaking state and federal law and they know what the law says and they're breaking it. And in my case, and I know many other people, the same thing, like I said, my parental rights have never been terminated. And my ex would take this order from the family court and show it to the school and to the police and the doctors and all this stuff and say, look, her rights are terminated. She has no parental rights. She doesn't have any more rights to Angelina, only supervised visits. And he would show them the memorandum that the judge wrote and tell them that this is proof that my rights were terminated. So then these people who are teachers, cops, doctors, whatever they are, they're not lawyers. You know, if they're reading a 10-page document with footnotes and citations and all this stuff, to them, it's going to be like, okay, it looks legit. They're not going to sit there and read the whole thing and analyze it. And if a parent goes and says, look, here's the order showing that the mom's parental rights were terminated, and they show a 10-page order with legalese and you don't understand it, are you going to question that? Who's going to think that a person is going to lie and say that the mom's rights were terminated when they weren't? So now I have doctors, police, schools, and everything saying to me, sorry, unless you can prove that your parental rights weren't terminated, we're going to assume that they were, which is crazy because it's almost like, how are you going to prove that something didn't happen? You can't prove that something didn't happen.
Because they're going by that old premises of if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. And then they don't have that type of understanding. They just look at, when they hear a parent has sole custody, they assume that that is the blanket all, be all, end all. There you go. Because I know parents who have told me they've talked to the school and that comes up. Oh, do you have sole custody? Oh, well, we can't talk to you. I had it happen to me with my kids' doctors right in the beginning. When I started calling up the doctors in the beginning, you know, I worked a full-time job. I was teaching. I also did a lot of other things to try to make an extra buck. So I kept busy. And I do come from that older generation where mothers take care of the kids. They take the kids to the doctor's visits. They feed them the whole shebang. And I'm not trying to dismiss myself of responsibility. I was more than willing to do everything that I could and when I could. But when I'm at school, when I'm teaching, and my ex is taking my son to the doctor's visits, you know, there's a level of trust there. And when things started getting involved, especially with the divorce, you know, I called the doctors and, you know, I reintroduced myself. and we're talking, and then with two doctors, by the end of the call, it was like, it was almost like they copied each other. First one doctor, especially when I started bringing up some things that, I said that they had said, and they were like, no, and then by the end of the call, I got to hear, I'm not so sure if it's legal for us to talk to you. Really, we've been on the phone for an hour and a half. It's like, now you're not so sure if it's legal to talk to me. Two doctors in a row. I wanted to say, boy, you know,
And you would think that these schools and medical centers would train people on the laws. And if they don't know how to train people, that maybe they would have a legal department that can handle these things properly instead of denying people their rights, which is the norm in Connecticut. And I know parents who, like, even I went to go get records for my daughter's pediatrician's office in Milford, and I was charged with a felony, and I was arrested and charged with a felony. So apparently, not only are they violating the law, but they're arresting people who are trying to assert their rights. So, all I can say is that things are really bad right now, worse than they've ever been. And I think everybody needs to continue to speak up. If there's more people out there from Connecticut listening to this that have stories and things that they want to talk about, I think it's important that everybody speaks up, because we can't let this be in the dark anymore.
well, you're right. And I know a lot of people out there are under they want to bring about change. They want to get together and do something collectively. And, there's an old saying, you can't fight City Hall or something like that. It's going to take a lot more than just everybody getting together, because right now I don't see people really banding together. But I want to leave you with another thought too. You know, there are a lot of things that are going on, and I know, like you said, and I agree, it's getting much worse. And when I talk about even professionals not knowing laws or doing certain things, I mean, even going way back in the day, a parent keeps a kid home from school, whatever reason. Then the school says we need a doctor's note. Parent goes to the doctor. Could you write me a note saying my kid was sick? Doctor writes a note. Believe me, I know that happens. I know it has happened. It's something simple like that professionals are just doing something that they figure, doesn't matter. And the real thought I want to get to is, nobody's going to put their head on the chopping block or risk their bread and butter, their reputation, just to help somebody F somebody else over. So, like I said, these lawyers, whatever they're doing, a lot of them, they are doing it in accordance with the law. They just know how to play it and how to go around it, above it, underneath it, and through it. But when it comes down to it, for just to screw people over for the sake of screwing people over and put themselves at risk like that, nah. I've told people, even in my case, and I had the money back then, my lawyers stood to make even more money if they fought for me, which was, well, they screwed me over by doing nothing, but it does say something, especially going into trial. That's where all the costs, um,
Unless your ex paid them enough to get them to do what she wanted, which
uh,
happens a lot. The other side will
yeah, I
bribe,
agree.
and then next thing you know, they're turning on you. Just like I said, after Cretella had the private meeting off the record in his office with my ex, and they didn't tell me what it was about. After that, he was working against me. But
A lot of it too, I think, and I understand people pay people off. I get it. But I think a lot of it too is that the whole system is set up so that they can keep making the kind of money that they're doing. I mean, if you think about how many clients a lawyer possibly has, if they devoted the kind of attention and time to every client in the way needed to be, they couldn't possibly handle as many. Now, if they have a whole handful of clients where they just keep on the side burner, they're like, yeah, here's my bill, 100 here, 100 there, 100 there, while I focus on the cases that I really want and need to devote my time and energy. You, you're actually you're trickling in the funds, so to speak, all those extra little dimes and whatnot. No, it's wrong right across the board. And like you said, it is an issue of wealth. Some people can afford it, and there's those who can't. These lawyers charge astronomical prices. Even mediation. Lawyers for mediation, it's only really only supposed to be like a couple hundred an hour. Trial lawyers get $400, $500, $600 an hour.
Yeah.
A lot of these clients don't ever, like I said, don't even get to set their foot into the courtroom. I know many parents that got arrested for things. They never got proper hearings. Went right to let's make a plea agreement. Here, we charge you with 20 ridiculous things. And you know what? If you plead guilty to this one little light thing, we'll make everything go away.
Yeah, but then they won't give a trial. I've been waiting more than 2 years for my trial, and they're supposed to close your case if your trial doesn't start within 12 months. And it's been like 26 months for one charge, 22 for the other. Where's my speedy trial? I asked for
you just took the words out of my mouth. Sixth Amendment.
they say to me, they say, oh no, your case is stayed. The case isn't stayed. They've scheduled hearings. They've issued orders. They've been doing proceedings this whole time. But then when I ask for my speedy trial, they say the case is stayed. But then the protective order is still in effect for years. You said restraining order was for 6 months. Mine's been in effect for 2.5 years and has no expiration date. That's also illegal. But I could go on all day talking about this, and
Me as well.
It doesn't help anything to sit and dwell about it. But I think it's good for people to feel like they're not alone and to feel like they're not the only one who got screwed over. And the more people that say, hey, you know what, I had a bad experience, and like, then you realize patterns and you start to see it's the same judges, it's the same GALs, it's the same lawyers. And then you realize, like, you said before, oh, like they're not breaking the law. They are. They're breaking federal law. And a lot of times people think it's okay because it's not every day that you see the FBI coming and indicting people for this kind of stuff. But if enough people report it and there's enough proof and enough irrefutable proof where it's like you can't look the other way, then they have to do something. Especially then if there's public pressure, then it makes it a lot harder for them to just bury it.
And yes, I once again, I do agree with you. And I'll go right back to what I was saying. Even with somebody breaking the law, it's not like the minute you break the law, somebody just shows up and gives you a bop over the head and says, gotcha. No, now you have got to bring charges. You've got to bring a case against them. With so many people that these injustices are happening, you would think that there would be lawyers out there that would be diving in to take these cases. But the reality is, no, they're not. This is why these lawyers are getting away with it, because nobody is bringing them to justice.
Yeah, and they won't go against the crooked judges, like the lawyers that said to me, like Stephanie Bernstein from Middletown or wherever her office is. She said to me, oh, I know that your daughter's being sexually abused and I feel so bad and I really want to help you, but I just can't go against Judge Grossman. This is my bread and butter. And if I help you, I'll never win another case again. And this is my bread and butter. And she's like, oh, I feel so bad for you. My daughter goes to UConn Law School just like you, and da-da-da. And then come to find out that her son is like an addict and has like had multiple overdoses. And it's like, okay, well, you know what it's like to be a mother and watch your son overdose and have a drug problem, and you feel bad about that, but you'll sit there and watch a little girl get sexually abused and know that you have the power to help, but look the other way. But when it's your kid, oh, poor me, or my son. But you know what? my little girl didn't ask to be sexually abused. Her son did choose to stick needles in his arms. So I don't feel bad for her son. I don't feel bad for her. I think she's a terrible lawyer. I think Cretella is a terrible lawyer. And every single one of these people, I'm going to make sure get prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I don't care how long it takes. And even if I don't succeed, I'll die trying, because I'm not going to sit here and let these monsters, evil people think they can just get away with things. And they're not going to get away with it, because there's too much proof now, and I have too many witnesses and too much evidence for them to get away with it. So they might laugh at me and mock me and think that I'm crazy and unhinged and call me every name in the book, but I'm educated, I'm well educated, and I know the law like the back of my hand. So that's all I'm going to say.
That's the best thing anybody could do, is to become informed, to gain knowledge and understanding. And the years pass very quick. They do. Things aren't going to change overnight. I've told a lot of people, I'm like, you're absolutely right. I believe you. I see it, everything that you're saying. You're not going to pop, even if you get to pop into the courtroom and get to be heard, it's not going to just change overnight. It's going to be a battle. You got to have the resolve to keep doing it. You have to have the strength and to keep your head on. And, you have to actually, a lot of it's smoke and mirrors. Yeah, you have to be able to blow it out of the way and see it for what it is. Sign nothing, give into nothing, hold your ground, and not easy to do.
Yeah. People need to be, I want to empower people to be able to do their own research, learn the laws, learn your rights, learn your children's rights. Because if you rely on these lawyers, like you said, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and you end up worse off than you started.
I think of all the people out there right now, whether they're getting married, whether a child's being born or about to be born, whether they're currently acting parents, whatever you want to call it. Let's try to just imagine how many out there within any amount of time, whether it be a month or a year, their whole world is going to drop from under them, and they're going to enter into a nightmare that they could not believe for whatever reason, out of spite, out of whatever. And they're going to go into it blindly. Now, if the majority of those people had a little more information, the demand that their lawyers inform them, that would cause the biggest difference. Then little by little, these lawyers wouldn't be able to get away what they're getting away with. The more informed and knowledgeable that the people become, it's just like anything else, though. Constitution, many things. Not everybody's able to know and understand everything. For even a person right now in the state of Connecticut to say, "Oh yeah, I know every law in Connecticut." Oh, you do? You know the one about that says your horse and carriage, you can't shit in the street? Sorry for that rudeness, but do you know the law from 1800 that's still on the books that nobody took off? So nobody can know everything everywhere. But having an understanding of, even with a kid in school, there's a lot of parents out there, they don't know their rights. I worked in the schools. I've seen a lot of parents that got bullied and given the runaround about their own kids, and they didn't know how to put their foot down. And a lot of them that tried to put their foot down, and in all the areas, they just keep getting away with it. What? Why?
And a lot of people don't realize the all these laws don't matter. The Constitution is the only real thing that matters in the country, in every state. And so we're allowed to do whatever we want, and the government can't do anything. They're only limited to the powers they have in the Constitution. So every single law on the books in the state of Connecticut that violates the Constitution is void and illegal and can be challenged and stricken down. And so it's people need to remember the Constitution trumps everything. And you can say, well, there's this law, there's that law, this law. Well, if the Constitution says that you have the right to petition the government, and the court says, oh, well, we're going to say that you can't file without asking for permission. That's unconstitutional. They say, well, according to Connecticut general statute, blah, 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 we're allowed to do that if blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. They
But
can't do that. So the more that people sit there and take it and don't question it and just allow it, we slowly get into a form of government where it's like a dictatorship kind of government, where the people are living in a police state where these rogue judges and these rogue police are basically their, they sick them on the people when they want. And then when they don't want them to, like, for example, in family court, I had so many court orders where my ex would violate the court order. I would go to the police to make a report, and they would say, okay, well, this is just a civil matter. We can't enforce this. Then I go back to family court, file a contempt, and they'd say, oh, well, it's no big deal. And then they wouldn't enforce it either. But then when it was the other way around and the order was on me, they would arrest me, they would enforce it, they would issue sanctions.
absolutely.
So it's like, if they just decide that the other side, has a better connections, better lawyers, more money, whatever it is, and they don't like you, it's like, you're not going to get a fair hearing. You're not going to get a fair treatment. And that's also unconstitutional. So it's our right having a trial by jury.
Everything you just said, I know. I've talked to many parents and they've said the same thing. I called the cops. The cops said that's a civil matter. I went to the court. The courts didn't want to do about it. They said I should call the cops. It's like
the revolving door.
It's a catch-22, back and forth. Yeah. Another thing. Hold on a second. All right. Well, I lost that thought, but
it's all right.
But it's everything that you've been saying, and it comes back to, if you do not get the opportunity to get heard in the courtroom equally,
then there's no justice, period, because then there's no due process. And it comes down to everything. If there's no due process, it's not constitutional. So anytime that you're being forced into a decision or rushed into not doing something or coerced or anything like that, or told you can't show your evidence, you can't testify, you can't cross-examine, the whole proceeding is tainted.
Yes, and I just got my thought back. This is why I have a belief, and I'm not going to go into the longer explanation or try to give a full justification, but the whole idea about ADR resolution and coming to agreements, because in a way, when parties come to agreements of any kind, whether it's even a plea agreement, that agreement almost circumvents and does supersede the laws, the due process, the everything. When you make agreements in court, it could take away the ability to go to the appellate court, because now you're under contract, literally. You're under a contract because you made an agreement. Just the same thing as somebody commits a crime. They don't automatically go for a trial. They don't. There might be arraignment or whatever, but we all know that they offer plea agreements.
Right, but you can't enter into an agreement without informed consent, which you don't have if you're being coerced through fraud, deceit, and other things. That's why, like with contracts, there's a statute of frauds. You can't, just because you sign something doesn't mean it's binding. If there was fraud, deceit, omission, or they lied to you and stuff, that contract's void on its face.
Yes,
and can be appealed, and any judgment can be challenged on the basis of fraud at any time, even if it was 20 years ago.
And even in my case, I had things that had happened, and then later on, when I started to find things out, I had one lawyer that actually blew up on me on the phone and said something like, well, you're just going to have to learn to stick to what you agree to.
That's them lying to try to bully you.
Stick to what I agree to. Let me put it to you this way. I saw my kid. I did. I saw him supervised because that's what my ex wanted. I didn't want to. I asked if I had to do it. Nobody could answer the question. 3 months actually went by. My first lawyer didn't even set it up. I got the second lawyer and I talked to her about it. Her attitude was, "Oh, just do it. You know, it'll probably only go for a few times and then you'll be done with it." I should have somebody like smack me in the face, you know. And then after I did it, like I said, later on, I go and find out. I saw my kid supervised, and the only rationale is because I agree to it. Here, let me be a little bit, I don't care if it's the right term, facetious or cynical. That's right. I was standing there and my lawyer said, "Al, would you like to see your kid supervised?" I went, "Oh, yeah, please. Oh, yes, supervised visits. Oh, yeah, that's just what I want. Yeah, I want to be supervised. I want somebody watching me like I'm a freaking felon." I'm sorry, that may seem a little crazy, but there's a
No,
lot of parents out there that are
Connecticut,
being forced to see their kids supervised and they're not being given a justification why they have to do it.
yes,
And
and
they're
in
being told,
Connecticut, convicted felons are getting sole custody. So
yeah,
being a felon will get you custody in Connecticut.
but a lot of parents are being told, well, this is the pathway to you getting custody is seeing your kids supervised. You find me 100 people out there that would actually believe that if you asked them, do you believe supervised visits would be a good thing for a parent to do fighting for their child?
No, ask
I
them,
like to,
would you believe it if your lawyer that you paid thousands of dollars told you that? Because most people would say yes. If my legal professional who I'm paying says that to me, I'm going to believe them. Didn't you believe yours when they said that to you? Otherwise, you would have never
you
signed it.
know, you know, well, believe it or not, it wasn't. I didn't sign anything. What ended up happening was,
Your sound is not working again.
oh, how about now?
Yeah.
This, when they said, my second lawyer said, "Well, don't you want to see your kid?" But and of course I do. 3 months, 3 months. So I'll get right to what happened. I ended up calling the supervised center because I thought I had to. I set it up. Think about that. I called it up. I set it up. Okay. How does that not make me look guilty that I voluntarily set up supervision? And then somebody will say, and you're saying you didn't agree to it? I didn't agree to it because nobody said to me, "Do you agree to it?" Just like in our case turned into mediation. No one said to me from the beginning, "Do you agree to mediation?" No, I got served a restraining order, kicked out of my house. It seemed like it was pretty severe. It didn't seem like we were going to get together and make an agreement. It sounded like I had a sheriff that served me. I never been served anything in my life but a speeding ticket. And now I got a sheriff at the door. When he handed me that restraining order and I saw my ex's name on it, I was like, "Oh my God. Oh my God. Who did she get a restraining order against?" And then I saw my name. I passed out. I went down on the floor. I passed out, and then I didn't even know which way was up or down. I was like, "Yeah, what?" You know, not to mention the part where, not to mention, hold on, what? I have to go in a minute. But
Is there anything that you want to say as a closing thought and anything you'd like to leave people all with?
the bottom line is that people who are going to go through it are going through it. You're starting to go through it. Whatever. They need to become informed, and the lawyers are not doing the job. And they're not empowering people to go pro se and provide them with the resources to get informed.
I agree.
And the other thing is too, I hate to say this, but sometimes you have to look at it and you have to choose your battles. You have to focus your energies as to what you're going to really go after and attack. Because once you start becoming a loose cannon and you start calling the police, you start calling the FBI, the DOJ, the ABC, the DFF, blah, 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 you know what? After a while, you're blackballed. Your name, everybody knows your name. And you know what? They don't even want to hear it. They're not going to hear it. It's like the story about the boy that cried wolf. You ever hear that story?
Yeah.
Boy cried in the village. Yeah, he cried wolf, wolf, wolf.
It's like the people who make false accusations to get restraining orders make it so the people who are real victims of abuse get accused of lying. And so it's like, for me, I never cried wolf, but I was never believed even with proof. And now I'm blackballed, like you said. So it's like, I think after a while, they just believe that you're lying until you show them that you're not.
Well, they also know that unfounded accusations do more damage than proven ones.
That's true. And that's what people need to know.
It's absolutely true.
Going to the police won't always protect you. Most of the time, it'll make it worse.
Hey, one of the things I was accused of, that I support terrorist groups like ISIS, and that went in front of a judge.
Wow.
Can you imagine? The judge is reading through this restraining order. He yells, he has an attitude, whatever. He cordless drills, like I told you, supports ISIS.
I can't believe the judge granted that. That doesn't meet the standard for a restraining order at all.
Are you kidding me? I should have been in an orange jumpsuit. I mean, not to make a joke out of it, in 2015, and it was ridiculous. It was something that I said when I was watching the news one time, and I know my ex had the recording on. A bunch of, well, whatever it was, like I said, I just said, my comment was actually about a bunch of American soldiers, retired, that had gone over to Africa to support Christians that are under persecution from ISIS. And I said something like, look, I said, these guys are going over there, picking up their guns, and somehow that got misconstrued into that I support ISIS. And it still blows my mind. Actually, I remember back then when I found that out and I read that, I said, are you kidding me? That somebody might, or even in the court, I didn't know. I'm a terrorist supporter.
But like, even if somebody was, that's still not grounds for a restraining order in Connecticut.
No.
So it's crazy that the drill, being scared because there's a drill, that's not grounds either. It's not like you hit her, it's not like you pointed it at her,
Never, ever, ever laid a hand on anybody in my life. She got a second restraining order on me a few years later because I texted that I was going to get this party started and I was going to make the whole country hear me, because she was basically, I told her, I'm going to put this back in court and I'm going to get this party started. I'm going to make the whole country hear me. I said something, and the next thing I know,
they said it's a
few days before my kid's birthday, even though that happened a couple months before, she waited right before my kid's birthday. I'm given a restraining order.
And it was granted.
And the lawyer even said to me, there's no grounds for this. And I told that lawyer, good, no agreement, I want my hearing. And I went to court, and next thing I know, they all walked out of family relations, and my lawyer goes, we made an agreement. And I'm like, what part of no agreement did you not understand?
What part of we is in that agreement is what you should have said.
And it got everything, it got, the restraining order got removed, except from what I told you, one stipulation, that I was not allowed for 1 year to text anything nasty.
Wow.
Yep. So that's why I made sure I didn't even say fiddlesticks, because I don't want to end up in the county lockup on a Wednesday night, take a showers with bubble because I said fiddlesticks. I mean, I'm going to make a joke, but that's it's ridiculous.
You'll end up in Union Ave with those bologna sandwiches.
You know what? And that's another thing I tell people: you got to find some humor. You got to keep an open mind, because you'll die mentally if you don't keep yourself healthy.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for your time and all your insight, and thank you so much.
Thank you as well very much for this opportunity to talk. And I was a little bit tired today, so hopefully we can do this again sometime, and I'll be a little fresher and on my game. But thank you very
absolutely.
much.
No problem. Anytime. Thank you again. Take
And I
care
just
of
like to say
yourself.
my thoughts and prayers to everybody out there.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.